Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our program. In today's program, it will be from the Visual Arts Secondary Curriculum, Year 11, Strand 2, The Elements and Principles of Art. For today, we will be talking about balance, and it will be on balancing visual weight. Our learning outcome for today, you should be able to identify different ways to create visual balance, apply elements to create balance in artworks, and to use appropriate art vocabulary in relation to balance. In visual art, all compositions have different visual weights. So what is visual weight? Visual weight is the force which prevails or dominant in the image. Let us look at this image. What do you see first? Noticed how your eyes is drawn to the big circle? Why do you think so? What pulls to your eyes to the painting? Let us look at another painting. This is by Kandinsky. What pulls your eyes to the painting? Why do you think so? Let us find out. Definitely the circle, as you can see in Kandinsky's painting, it pulls your eye due to its value and color. There are many ways or techniques used by artists to balance their work. One of them is value. What is value? Value is the lightness and darkness of a gray or a color. When white is added, or the color value, it will be light. It is called tint. When black is added, or the color value is dark, it is called shade. Our next one is color. What is color? Color is the sensation produced in the eye by light of different wavelengths. To make it simple, color is one of the elements of arts that produce when light strikes an object and is reflected back to the eye. All color mixtures derived from the three primary colors, which are blue, red, and yellow. And our last one for today is distance. What is distance? Distance in visual art refers to the gap between one object to another. Okay, boys and girls, I am going to demonstrate how balance is used. You can do it as well. You will need to have pieces of paper, some paints, and paintbrush. And our last demonstration will be done by one of our art teacher from Leonimuenga Folk College. He will be painting a scenery whereby balance was considered. Tamaiti o Lisia Awala e tamawhai e mawai o po le whaamalama atili ai le vaenga le o le pāleni. Taipeo tatou ata sa le sona sa whapena o na whaalifo I vaiaso tuanai sa tatou tala noa ai le balancer po tira tora foot. Okay, ile image la lea. Ai tanga inge nei ai, o lo iai le lio. A whaape e te mana o whaapaleni, wai ai tanga inge ai, e la boa le si lio, e la ititi le si lio. Before we actually add in the value there, sa mamafa le lio la boa. Ai mama le lio le ititi. So how do we balance it? Okay, the way we balance it is by adding the darker value. Ole whaapalenina, ole vaenga lea, e ke kango whaapopo le value, le shape lea, ia mawhai ai loa ona paleni. O se, that is just a summary of what we have discussed in the previous lesson based on balance. These are some of the ways we can balance an image or a painting or a drawing. This is another way of balancing a painting or a drawing. Okay, this was drawn as in two circles on this side and on this other side. As you can see, we have watered down the edges of this circle here. Why? Because if we water down the edges, if we water down the edges, it would actually lighten the volume, or it would actually lighten the weight of this object, as we have discussed earlier that all objects have visual weight. As you can see here, we are trying to balance it by watering down the edges. When I talk about edges, I'm talking about the edge of the circle. So by watering it down, it will lighten the weight of the image. Okay, when we add value to the circle or have sharp edges, that adds weight to the image. As you can see here, that this side is heavier than this side. Why? It's because the edges is sharp. So remember, when we have sharp edges, it means that the image has weight, it's heavy. When we lighten the edges, like here, what's shown here, it actually lightens the weight or the visual weight of the image. So these are the things you have to consider when you are drawing or painting. our last image here. As you can see, this image, it's like that. This side is heavy while the other side is not heavy. Why is it heavy? It's because of the size. It's because of the size, and it's because of the strong color here. So this side is heavy. It's heavy. How do we balance it? How do we balance the image? That is by adding value to the colors. When you add value to the color, or add darker lights of the color, it would actually pulls the image to be balanced. So therefore, students, another way to balance your painting or your drawing or whatever you are creating is you can balance your work by adding color, adding value of a color. So that is another technique when you work on balance. Okay, just to sum up again, we have 3 ways of showing balance.
E tāua le tāpena pena masauni teimi o mala whaalana tūrei teimi uma. O ta iala mo le mautinoa le mala puipuia ma le saunga le mua tau mawhai teimi uma. Vaianga mo mua, e tāua le fufuru mamaori mo tangata olo o te pena ina tau mawha. Fufuru mamali ma pea uma ona whaunga ina le whale le tāua. Ia mamā masaunga le muno o whanga. Ma mea whaitino olo o whaunga e ngā sese tau mawhai peo naifi, lau papatipi mea ai ma apa olo o tewi nai tau mawha. Ia mauti noa le malu pui pui o mea tau mawha mai ni seti whaalafua e pei o lango, monga monga mai CF